Texas politics has never been for the faint of heart, but what's happening right now between Attorney General Ken Paxton and former Congressman Beto O'Rourke is on a whole different level. This isn't just a disagreement, it's a collision between two political heavyweights, each with loyal armies of supporters and a long history of trading blows. Paxton is now pushing to hold O'Rourke in contempt of court, accusing him of violating a judge's order in a defamation case. O'Rourke, in true form, isn't backing down, framing the entire situation as a politically motivated attack designed to silence him. The stakes, far bigger than a single court ruling. This fight could reshape the public image of both men, sway voters heading into the next election cycle, and send a message to every political player in the state. In Texas, the gloves never come off, and as the drama unfolds, the rest of the country is watching, because what happens in Texas rarely stays in Texas. The animosity between Ken Paxton and Beto O'Rourke didn't begin with this contempt motion. It's been brewing for years. O'Rourke, known for his fiery campaign speeches and sharp criticism of Texas Republican leadership, has often singled out Paxton as a symbol of what he calls corruption and abuse of power in the state. Things escalated during the last election cycle, when O'Rourke, in multiple interviews and social media posts, accused Paxton of being morally unfit for office and hinted at unethical behavior tied to his ongoing legal troubles. Paxton responded by filing a defamation lawsuit, claiming O'Rourke's remarks weren't just political jabs, they were deliberate lies meant to damage his reputation. A judge stepped in, issuing an order aimed at curbing certain statements and setting clear boundaries for both sides. For months, the legal fight simmered behind the scenes, overshadowed by other political headlines. But now Paxton says O'Rourke has crossed the line again, openly defying that order, and he's ready to drag him back into court to prove it. This is where the latest chapter begins. Ken Paxton's legal team wasted no time making their move. In a newly filed motion, they argue that Beto O'Rourke has willfully and flagrantly violated the court's prior order by repeating statements the judge explicitly told him to avoid. According to Paxton, these weren't slips of the tongue or ambiguous comments. They were direct public attacks that crossed a clear legal line. The motion points to recent interviews, social media posts, and even a campaign-style event where O'Rourke allegedly used the same language that sparked the original defamation case. Paxton's lawyers claim this shows a pattern of disregard for the court's authority, and that letting it slide would send a dangerous message to anyone facing similar restrictions. If the judge sides with Paxton, the consequences could be serious. Contempt of court isn't just a slap on the wrist. It can mean hefty fines, mandatory public retractions, and in extreme cases, even jail time. For O'Rourke, the optics alone could be damaging, painting him as someone who thinks the rules don't apply to him. But to his supporters, these same accusations look like proof that Paxton is trying to weaponize the courts to silence political opponents. And that tension between law and politics is exactly why this fight is capturing national attention. Beto O'Rourke isn't backing down. In fact, he's leaning in. Within hours of Paxton's contempt filing making headlines, O'Rourke's team blasted out a statement framing the move as a desperate attempt to bully critics into silence. They argue that the court order Paxton is relying on is overly broad, unconstitutional, and designed to shield a public official from legitimate scrutiny. Rather than quietly negotiating behind the scenes, O'Rourke has taken his defense to the public square. He's continued speaking at rallies, doubling down on the same themes that landed him in legal trouble: corruption, transparency, and accountability. He insists he's exercising his First Amendment rights, and that Paxton is terrified of voters hearing the truth. O'Rourke's legal team is preparing to fight the contempt motion head-on with a strategy that blends legal arguments and political theater. They're expected to claim that Paxton's interpretation of the judge's order is overly aggressive, and that any statements O'Rourke made were based on verified facts or matters of public concern, protections that carry heavy weight in defamation law. By refusing to retreat, O'Rourke is gambling on a classic political play: turn a legal fight into a rallying cry. The risk: If the judge rules against him, the price could be steep, not just financially, but in how he's perceived by swing voters who might see defiance as recklessness rather than courage. To understand why this showdown feels so explosive, you have to rewind to the origins of the feud. It all started months ago when Beto O'Rourke publicly accused Ken Paxton of corruption and abuse of office, referencing Paxton's long-running legal troubles, including securities fraud charges and an FBI investigation into alleged misuse of his position. Paxton responded with a defamation lawsuit, arguing that O'Rourke's comments were not only false, but deliberately damaging to his reputation. The case escalated quickly, with Paxton's lawyers pushing for a temporary injunction to stop O'Rourke from repeating the accusations while the lawsuit played out. A judge agreed, issuing a narrow but firm order. O'Rourke was to avoid making certain specific claims in public. From Paxton's perspective, the injunction was a necessary safeguard to prevent further harm, while the courts sorted out the truth. From O'Rourke's camp, it looked like censorship, a powerful elected official using the legal system to muzzle a political opponent. That tension simmered in the background for weeks, until O'Rourke's recent remarks reignited the fire. Whether they were an intentional act of defiance or a continuation of his standard stump speech depends on which side you believe. But one thing is certain: the contempt allegations have transformed an already contentious lawsuit into a high-stakes battle over free speech, political accountability, and the limits of court authority. For Ken Paxton, this fight is about more than silencing a political rival. It's about survival. Paxton has weathered years of scandals, from the pending securities fraud charges to whistleblower complaints from within his own office. Each controversy chips away at his public image, but he's managed to hold on by rallying his political base and framing himself as a victim of partisan attacks. If he can win the contempt motion against O'Rourke, Paxton can claim a decisive legal victory that reinforces his narrative, that he's the target of unfounded smears and that he's willing to use every tool at his disposal to defend himself. It would also send a chilling message to other critics: cross him publicly, and you might face real legal consequences. But there's a flip side. If the court rules against Paxton, it could validate O'Rourke's argument that the Attorney General is abusing his power to silence dissent. That could energize Paxton's opponents, embolden watchdog groups, and give the media a fresh reason to rehash his past legal troubles. Politically, a loss could also weaken Paxton's influence within Texas's Republican power structure. While he's popular among the party's hardline base, more moderate GOP leaders have shown signs of fatigue with the constant cloud of controversy. A public defeat at the hands of O'Rourke could make him look less like a fighter and more like a liability, a dangerous perception for someone whose political survival depends on projecting strength. For Beto O'Rourke, this battle is a double-edged sword. On one hand, being dragged into court by the Texas Attorney General gives him a massive platform. It allows him to position himself as a champion of free speech, standing up against what he can frame as political intimidation. In the court of public opinion, especially among his supporters, that's a powerful narrative. Every headline about Paxton trying to jail him amplifies O'Rourke's message. It draws national attention, rallies his base, and reinforces the idea that he's willing to take on the most powerful figures in Texas politics without backing down. It also creates a symbolic showdown, a high-profile Democrat versus a controversial Republican power player, both fighting not just for legal victory but for public perception. But the risks are just as high. If the judge rules that O'Rourke violated the court order, the free speech defense could collapse. He could be hit with fines, court restrictions, or, in the most extreme case, actual jail time. That would shift the story from Beto stands up to Paxton to Beto defies the law, a narrative Paxton's team would push relentlessly. And while O'Rourke thrives on being in the political spotlight, legal battles are expensive and time-consuming. If this drags on, it could sap resources, distract from other political initiatives, and leave him stuck in a courtroom instead of on the campaign trail. For O'Rourke, the stakes aren't just about winning or losing a case. They're about protecting his political future and avoiding a misstep that could define him for years. This clash between Ken Paxton and Beto O'Rourke is more than a personal feud. It's a reflection of the deep political fault lines running through Texas. On one side, you have Paxton, a figure who embodies the state's hard right power structure, unafraid to use legal tools as political weapons. On the other, O'Rourke, the progressive firebrand who has built his brand on challenging that very system, even when the odds are stacked against him. In many ways, this is Texas politics distilled, aggressive, confrontational, and played out in full view of the national media. Both men are calculating their moves not just for the immediate outcome, but for the way those moves will resonate with voters, donors, and political allies. The stakes are amplified by timing. Texas is on the cusp of another high-stakes election cycle, and every public skirmish between these two figures becomes political fuel. For Republicans, Paxton's legal pursuit of O'Rourke could be framed as holding a loud Democratic critic accountable. For Democrats, O'Rourke's resistance becomes a rallying cry against what they see as authoritarian overreach. Beyond Texas, national political watchers are paying attention too. This isn't just a local dispute. It's a symbolic battle over free speech, political power, and the boundaries of legal authority. And in an era where political narratives spread instantly online, both Paxton and O'Rourke know that the court of public opinion could matter just as much as the court of law. The clash between Ken Paxton and Beto O'Rourke isn't just a local story. It has far-reaching implications. First, it highlights the growing trend of using legal systems as political tools, raising questions about fairness, accountability, and the balance of power. When elected officials pursue opponents in court, the line between justice and politics becomes increasingly blurred. For Texas voters, this feud underscores the high stakes of state politics. Every legal maneuver, every public statement, and every news headline becomes a piece of a larger narrative that could influence upcoming elections. Citizens are watching not just what happens in court, but how each side positions itself for the next political cycle. Nationally, the case feeds into a larger debate about partisanship and governance. Observers from across the country are scrutinizing Texas as a test case for whether political power can be weaponized without consequences. The outcome could set precedents for how similar conflicts play out in other states, and even shape the strategies of both Republicans and Democrats moving forward. Ultimately, this feud is more than a battle between two individuals. It's a reflection of America's current political climate, polarized, high stakes, and increasingly public. And while the legal outcomes are still pending, the political ripples are already spreading far beyond the borders of Texas. So there you have it, a high-stakes political showdown that's gripping Texas and catching national attention. Ken Paxton versus Beto O'Rourke isn't just about lawsuits or campaigns. It's about power, strategy, and the lengths politicians will go to protect their positions. We'll be keeping a close eye on every twist, turn, and court filing, because what happens here could change the game for Texas and beyond. If you want to stay ahead of the story and catch all the latest updates, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join the conversation in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Stay informed, stay sharp, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.